Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back. I am the Bald Guy, and I am happy you have returned as we continue our look into Ephesus. Now, we've already learned about the history of it. Now we're going to look at the life in Ephesus. What was it like? Okay, so there were two different lifestyles in Ephesus. There was a Greek and Roman, and they intermingled together. Now, this was a vast, huge city with over 200,000 people, so yeah. Now, first let's look at what they wore. Now, all of them wore these white togas that went from here, circled around, and went all the way down to their ankles. And here's a really good picture of that. Okay, so now the age of puberty for the kids was 14 for boys and 12 for girls. So now let's look at the kids a little bit. So what happened with there, because there was two distinct different ways they raised their kids. First, the Greek culture. Now the Greek culture was very family orientated. Okay, they believed in a family lifestyle and a certain way of doing things. Okay, so from 7 years old, the boys alone were sent for education up until they were about 14. And they were sent to a gymnasium where they learned to read, write, and do music. Those were the three things they learned, because Greek was very into music. And as far as what they were going to do, from that point, they would work with the father and they would learn the family business and to expand it and to keep moving. And it's very family orientated. The girls themselves had no education whatsoever. They did not have any education for the Greek culture. What they did was they learned how to be a homemaker. Okay? They were married. They learned cooking and cleaning and taking care of the household. That was the main woman's responsibility, and that's what they did, and they taught their female children that. So, and as for Romans, though, now, Romans had a vast educational center. They believed in a lot of communing and a lot of learning and wanting to explore different aspects of everything. And they wanted both the men and the women to be able to participate in this. They were vastly educated. And from the age of 7, both the boys and the girls were sent for study. Okay, where they studied a vast array of different things. You're talking history, music, astronomy, poetry, measurements, philosophy, math, mythology, because they loved to debate, especially when it comes to different gods and different religions. I mean, they were just constantly in debate. So they taught their kids how to study that and to read and write. They also taught them the Greek language. Because remember, when they were doing their business affairs and everything else, they needed to learn the language of the other culture that was there with them. So they studied the Greek language as well, so they could read and write in Greek along with Roman. So that was their education system. So let's look at what would happen if a child was disabled. Maybe there's, disabled hand or mentally disabled or something like that along those lines. Well, the father could disown this child. And when they did that, what they would do is they would take them to the agora. Now, agora is a marketplace. And we'll discuss that in the next video. But it was a marketplace where they would take these kids and they would sell them. And if they couldn't be sold, then a lot of times they would just leave them there, where they would be picked up and basically sold in slavery because they weren't really wanted. They were less part of society back then. Pretty sad, but that is the way they did it. And if you want to know what this agora looks like, here's a picture of that. All right, so now, as far as their math, so how did they do their math? Well, a lot of day-to-day business activity for both the Greek and Romans were done on their fingers. So this was a big way of doing things, when they sold and then when they were giving their change out, they always did in fingers, or when they sold property, things like that amongst themselves. So the way they handled their calculation was all on fingers. Okay, so how did they tell their time? Now this is pretty interesting because they had two forms of telling time. Now the first was sundials, and we pretty much know what a sundial is and how it works. But there was also what they invented was a water clock, and they used a water clock. It was a large bowl with a stone in it, and it would circle around this bowl according to time. It was a pretty neat invention. So if you want to know what that looks like, here's a picture of that. Okay, so if you had one of these, this was also a very good sign of wealth, because you had to be wealthy to own one of these things. They were pretty expensive objects. Okay, so now we've got into that. We've got into what they wore. Now, let's look at some of the worship. Remember, the Romans, they loved to debate worship, any kind of worship at all. If there was a new god out there, they wanted to learn about it, they wanted to explore it. And then when Paul came in, he totally blew them away, and there was so many people that converted to Christianity. And we'll learn more about what happened with Paul later and his start when we dig into that. But basically their worship was when they got up in the morning, they prayed to these different gods. They had them set up as a little idol kind of manifestation where different gods they would worship, or they would be fixated on one of them and have them in there. At these marketplaces, they sold them everywhere. Okay, all these little false gods. And they did that in the morning and in the evening before bed. Now they also what they would do was they'd also go to, whenever they felt like going, was to Temple Artemis. And there they would have festivals, and these were nasty festivals. I mean, prostitution, a whole ball of wax there. Pretty disgusting. That's the way they did it. They would also eat and drink in there and have ceremonies. And we'll talk more about this temple here in my next video when we start going over some buildings. But if you want to know what that looked like, here's a picture of that. Okay, that was a temple where they all went to. Remember, Artemis was one of the 7 wonders of the world, so it was massive, it was huge, and that's where everybody took off to. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is how they bathed. And this was really interesting, and I found this very interesting. They had public baths. Okay, now the public bath was open from sunrise to sunset. Now from sunrise, for 7 hours, the women got to go and bathe. There was a hot and a cold area. And they got to bathe there, and they just bathed and left, and it was free to them. So women and the girls, they were allowed to bathe, and the children, they were allowed to bathe there for free. Okay, for the first 7 hours. Now, after 7 hours till sunset, this is where the men came in, because this was their social gathering point. It was the bar. Okay, it was the Cheers of Ephesus at that time. This is where everybody went at night after they got done with their work, before they went home. There they ate, drank, socialized, and took their baths. It was a very huge social gathering center for men, and they had to pay to get in there. So that was pretty interesting little thing I found out. All right, so that's pretty much life in Ephesus. That's pretty much day to day, doing their business, doing their thing. So, all right. Now, my next video, like I said, we're going to be focusing on some of the buildings that were there. We're going to go through these buildings and take a sort of a pictorial view of these things. All right, so what am I going to wrap this up with? Okay. There's really no theme because this is basically just how life was in Ephesus at that time. But what I really want to talk about at the end of this video is worship. I'm going to focus in on this worship part and how they just worshiped any God they pleased. Do we do that today? Are we worshiping the one true God, which is Jesus? Okay, I know we're sinful and I know we do these things constantly, but I'm telling you, as I've told you in every video, God forgives, okay? And he loves you so much. He loves you so much, he sent his son. The gospel message is very simple. He came to this earth. He taught us to have a relationship with him. Then he died on that cross. 3 days later, he rose again. Now, when we believe this, a very awesome transformation happens, okay? We receive the Holy Spirit, we receive God inside of us, and that outpouring goes out in love to other people. So we develop a personal relationship with Jesus that's passed out to others. And it's passed out of love. It's not passed out of an obligation or religious or anything like that. So if you are religious, get away from that, okay? At the time of rapture, you are not going to be going there if you're focusing on a religious aspect. Religion will not get you into heaven. Only Jesus will get you there, okay? You can only be with Jesus through a relationship and not all of these religious rules and giving money and doing good deeds because they're telling you to, okay? Being told to, that's not why he was here. When he taught us how to be personalized with God, okay? How he is our Father and we reach out to him, okay? And it's a loving relationship between the Father and you. That's what it's about. And it's so simple. I mean, you could not get more simple than that. Okay, and despite what you've done, despite what everything happens, that love continues to flow. Okay? Ask him for forgiveness. Ask him to come into your heart, and boom, the world opens up for you. Okay? You don't want to be on the narrow road. You want to be on that little narrow road with Jesus. That's where you want to be on. Okay? Don't get sidetracked. Sidetracked is religion and all this other stuff. And then, I tell you what, when persecution comes, when you are made fun of, when you are spit on, when you are trying to tell about Jesus and you're thrown in jail, maybe everything you have is taken away from you, it won't matter. It didn't matter to disciples, and it shouldn't matter to us. And to me, it doesn't matter. Let them take my life. I gladly give it. Okay, because I know that I'm going to be with Jesus, and that's all that counts. Okay? Our goal in life is to be with him. And while we're here, we outpour love and the gospel to others. We are here for one purpose, to preach the good news. The good news of Christ. That's what we're here for. And it could not be more simple. Okay? So you get out there and you tell people about Jesus, and don't worry about the world and what it does. Okay? Pray. Pray, 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 pray. All right, so I am the bald guy. I'm out of here. I hope you have an amazing day. Keep focusing on Jesus from sun up to sundown. As they worship their idols, we worship the one true God. Love you. I'm out of here.